Hello and welcome to part 2 in a series of videos that I'm putting out this week where I break down all the fights taking place this weekend at UFC on ESPN +8 from a betting perspective. I've already covered 3 fights on this card in part 1 of this video. I will leave a link for that video in the description below, and in today's video I'll be breaking down another 3 fights, including the main event between Iaquinta and Untitled Cerrone. Now you may be wondering why the uploads are coming out a little bit later this week than usual, and that is because I spent all day Monday recording a different kind of video, kind of like a vlog, which I think you're going to find very interesting. Unfortunately, I do need to dedicate quite a bit of time to edit that video, so it's not ready yet, but I will be putting it out in the next break in the UFC schedule, which is around about 2-3 weeks from now, so keep an eye out for that. I think you're going to like it a lot, and I wanted to mention that because I did promise to do a bonus video this week, a live stream, and I will still be doing that live stream because despite doing that vlog video, I'm still well ahead of schedule this week. As you can see here, I have only got 4 fights left to research, and it's only Thursday afternoon, so with still 2 full days to go, it's going to be an absolute breeze to finish my research this week. And I've already got 2 bets up for this card. I do think this card's a decent event for betting, so fingers crossed we can make some money this weekend. And as you can see, the chat room's hotting up with some discussion about the fights taking place this week. And I also want to say a massive thank you to everyone that left a comment in part 1 of this video, where you were all letting me know which type of bonus video you would prefer, if you would like me to break down Bellator Birmingham, which takes place on Saturday, or if you'd like a live stream where I will be trying to find a decent value prop bet for all the fights taking place this weekend, and also answering your questions in a live Q&A. And the vast majority of you wanted the UFC live Q&A video. And if you don't know what a prop bet is just basically a highly specific bet. So for example, Cerrone to win by knockout or TKO, that would be considered a prop bet. So I will be doing that video. I don't exactly know when it's going to be yet. It's probably going to be on Friday at some point. I will let you know in the future parts of this video exactly when it's going to be. I'm a bit tied up this Saturday, so it's probably not going to happen on Saturday. It's probably going to be Friday, but I will definitely do that to reward you for all the support you've given me over the last 2 months since I started putting out these videos. You know, the channel's only been up for 2 months, and already just today we hit 1,000 subscribers, so I can't thank you enough. I'm going to keep marching on to 10k and 100k and 1 million, and thank you for all the likes you've given me on the videos. Thank you for sharing these videos on any forums you post on your social media profiles, and also thank you for subscribing. Helps the channel grow, keeps me motivated to keep pumping out as much content as I can, so I really appreciate it. But enough of all that stuff. Let's get into the first fight that I want to talk about in today's video, which is going to be Cole Smith against Mitch Gagnon. I've got quite a lot to say about this fight, which I didn't think I would have, because before researching this card, I didn't know anything about Cole Smith. But one thing that I need to mention before we go any further is that there isn't much footage available on Cole Smith. Before I go any further, also shout out to everyone that's been asking me to install an ad blocker. I finally did it, and now you can see no more ads to disrupt your viewing pleasure. I've always been a bit against ad blockers because I'm a content creator and I understand how much work it takes to create content. I understand how expensive it is to create content. I also understand how hard it is to make money from creating content. So I've always been anti-ad blocker. I think they're quite damaging to the industry, to be honest with you, because, you know, everyone wants content for free, but it ain't easy to produce content for free because everyone's got to put food on the table. So I've never done it before, but I will say this ad blocker I've installed has sped up my browser a lot. So shout out to everyone that recommended that, and it will definitely be staying, at least for these videos, for the time being. But let's get back to this. Before I go any further into this betting tip, or not betting tip, but breakdown, betting analysis, I want to just point out that there's not much footage available on Cole Smith. So while I will be talking and giving some strong opinions on this fight, that is basically all based on the only fight that's available of Cole Smith to evaluate. So it's possible that could have been an out of character good performance, an out of character bad performance. I mean, there haven't been that many different fights for me to watch to kind of gain an overall picture of his skills. I'm evaluating him based on this one matchup from around about 1 year ago against Carlos Galvan. And while I'm talking about this fight, I'm actually going to play this in the background. There are some specific things that I want to call out about this matchup. But for now, while I'm talking, we'll just leave this run. And just very early on, just one thing for you to pay attention to. Cole Smith is the guy in the red corner. We can see him here. He's got the lighter skin. And you will notice straight away, as soon as this fight starts, his fighting style is very much wet blanket. Just tries to drive his opponents into the cage, wet blanket them. Not even particularly bothered with taking them down all the time, just likes to smother them with pressure. And it's interesting that his name's Cole Smith, because his fighting style is actually very similar to Colton Smith, who used to compete in the UFC. So if you are familiar with Colton Smith's fighting style, Cole Smith, with a very similar name, also has a very similar style. So I'm going to leave this running in the background, and I just need to make it clear, like I said, that there's not much footage available on him. So everything I say here is just basically based on this fight. But what I really like about Cole Smith is that he is relentless. He isn't a very good striker, not a very technical striker at all. In fact, there's not much footage of him striking in any of his past fights, because he likes to be all the way in, grinding on his opponents, wet blanketing them, tying them up against the cage, working for takedowns, or all the way out of their range where he can't really be hit. And this guy is relentless. He relentlessly shoots on his opponents for the entire duration of the fight. Here we can see he's got the full body lock, and he is just doing whatever he can to just make this guy work. His opponent, who is, sorry, I just forgot his name, is Carlos Galvan. He's just making Carlos Galvan work very hard in this position. Now I'm going to go through this fight and call out a few things that I want to talk about, just so you can gauge a picture of what Smith actually brings to the table. So if we skip a bit further ahead into the fight, we're going to go into the second round. As you can see, as we're in the second round, they've just come out for the second round, and as you can see, very early on in the round, Cole Smith just biding his time before he goes for another takedown. You know, as soon as Galvan starts to get aggressive and land some shots on him, it won't be long before Cole Smith will look to tie him up and drive him into the cage. And here we can see 20 seconds into round 2, he's already getting restless, and then eventually he drives in on a double leg takedown. And here you can see he's got his hands connected around Galvan's hips. Very nice takedown entry there. Smith was in a strong position to complete that, but Galvan did a really good job of creating a strong base and shutting it down. But if we just skip a bit further on into the fight, around about this point in the fight, you'll see one thing that I really like about Cole Smith. Here, he's been in the same position that I just showed you. He's got full control of Galvan's body with both his hands connected around Galvan's body. And in this little sequence here, you'll see his chain wrestling, which is very impressive. Look how he moves to take the back. Khabib Nurmagomedov style. He's realised that he's not able to get the takedown through a traditional double leg style, shooting in on the hips. So instead, he's going to transition into a different style of takedown, chain into a different style of takedown by using the body lock to go to Galvan's back. And now that he's controlled Galvan's back, he's able to drag him to the ground and take his back. And another thing I love that Smith does here is very, very quickly he goes to the body triangle. Notice he's already got the body triangle in play. He managed to take Galvan's back very quickly, and the body triangle is a very difficult position for his opponent to be in. It's very difficult to get out of the body triangle. It's much more of a dominant, controlling position to take your opponent's back and lock in a body triangle than to have two hooks in. And here you can see Smith's actually given up the body triangle and gone back to two hooks here. And because he did that, it actually wound up in Galvan being able to shake him off, reverse position, and wind up on top. This all started because Smith went from having the body triangle in play, and as soon as he went to the hooks, it's much easier to shake your opponent off. But Smith does something else here which I really like. He attacks with an arm bar, which creates a scramble, which enables him to pop quickly back to his feet. when you see Smith on his back, he's on his back multiple times in this fight, but one thing that I like about him is that he never accepts being on the bottom. He always attacks off his back to create scrambles to work back to his feet. This is a guy that doesn't accept being on the bottom, and I love that. And again, straight back to that wet blanket style of fighting where he's trying to smother his opponent in pressure. So very soon into this sequence, you'll see more chain wrestling from here. Here you can see Galvin doing a good job of fighting hands and preventing Smith from connecting his hands around and getting control of his body again. But there's no breaks for Galvin here. Smith is relentless. We're now a good 8 minutes into the fight, and Smith hasn't slowed down at all. Still wet blanketing Galvin, and here shoots in on another deep double leg takedown attempt. Just here, watch, he changes levels and shoots in here, getting his hands connected around Galvin's body. But Galvin has got good double leg takedown defense, creating a wide base against the cage. Smith knows he hasn't had much success with that position in getting the fight to the ground earlier in this matchup. So instead of wasting time and energy trying to force that technique, he goes back to what worked for him last time, chains the takedown into back control, and Khabib Nurmagomedov style starts to ride Galvin from back position again. Gets one hook in play very, very early on. And just beautiful chain wrestling really from Smith. Gets the second hook in. Nice back control. Just good stuff from Galvin. And as you can see there, again, very quickly gets the body triangle in play, which I love. When you see a fighter with two hooks in, it's always a risk that they can lose position and get reversed. But it's very difficult to do that to someone that has a body triangle locked in. So nice to see Galvin go to the body triangle nice and early when he takes control of his opponent's back. So let's go a bit further on into the fight. This is into the third round. Just up until about this point in a fight. And here we see a little bit of Cole Smith striking. But again, he isn't a striker. He understands he's a low-level striker. And he's just waiting for another opportunity to tie Galvin up and try and take this fight to the ground. So very early on in this third round, you'll see Galvin shoot a very, very deep takedown attempt any minute now. You can see Galvin giving him some problems standing, and Smith just biding his time. We're now 30 seconds into the round 3, and he uses Galvin's forward pressure against him to shoot a very nice deep double leg takedown. Now that technique wasn't working earlier on in the fight, because when Galvin was shooting in on these double legs, itchy nose again, when Galvin was shooting in on these double legs, when Smith was shooting in on these double legs, when Galvin already had his back against the cage, so Galvin could use the cage to defend those takedowns. But being able to generate so much drive on that double leg, being out in the open octagon or open cage, enabled Smith to complete that takedown. And again, Galvin shows a good ability to scramble out of that takedown attempt, because he's got very, very good double leg takedown defense. But watch what Smith does. Chains it into back control to take Galvin's back, which is absolutely brilliant. Watch, Galvin tries to use the cage here to stand back up, and instead Smith stops that by taking his back. Beautiful. Gets two hooks in very quickly again, and I'm pretty sure he goes the body triangle again here when he gets some space to do so. Yeah, there he goes, body triangle in play, or he's alternating between hooks, deep hooks and body triangles, which is very, very, very nice. So overall, I'm quite impressed from what I've seen from Smith. This is just the last thing that I want to show you, the only real prolonged moment of the fight where we get to see any of Smith striking. Here we can see just a minute left to go in the fight, a minute left to go in round 3. Galvin and Smith disengage, and for the final minute or so, choose to get into a striking fight. And as you can see by this time, after all the wet blanketing, after all the grinding, Smith's very tired, taking some deep breaths. But obviously, Galvin's run out of time, and it's too late to make him pay for it now. So I'll just leave that running in the background while we continue to talk about this fight. So, in fact, let's just, all I will say is go watch this. You can see Smith very tired here. You can see he's a low-level striker, but he doesn't give his opponent any time to breathe. He's all the way in or all the way out. There you can see as soon as he started to show signs of being tired, drove in, shot a takedown on Carlos, put his back tight to the cage, and that is basically it. That is Smith's style based on this fight. So now let's go further into breaking down how I see this fight going. So this is Cole Smith here in an interview with James Lynch, who does some great work. He's got some great MMA interviews, particularly with Canadian fighters. He's always a very valuable source of my research. And I just want to play this interview for you because Cole Smith is stepping up and taking this fight on around 3 weeks' notice. As we know, fighters that make their UFC debut fighters that make their UFC debut lose a large percentage of the time, but fighters that take their debut on such short notice lose a very, very high percentage of the time. So I always do a little bit of digging, try and find some interviews with fighters to see how their training and preparation's been for a short notice fight. And this interview between Cole Smith and James Lynch just sheds a little bit of light on, Smith's conditioning and training going into this matchup. So I'll just play this clip for you here.
Fit, worked out great.
Certainly has. You're always training. I mean, your last fight, I know as soon as that was done, took a little bit of time off, but was always training in the process and all that. For those who are looking at this as a short notice thing, like you're just jumping in there, you've already been sort of in a camp anyways.
I'm a total professional, man. I train twice a day, 6 days a week. I don't take rest, so it's what I do every day. It's my job.
It was your birthday recently. Is this the best birthday ever?
And there we go, guys, straight from the horse's mouth. So Cole Smith said he's a professional. Trains twice a day, 6 days a week. He's always in the gym, doesn't believe in training camps. He's constantly training, which is obviously a very, very good sign going into this matchup because he fights at a relentless pace. He is going to need big time cardio to be able to put that pace on Mitch Gagnon. It's a big step up in competition for him compared to anyone he's fought before. And this is his UFC debut, so the risk of octagon jitters and adrenaline dumping early in the fight is very real. So Cole Smith, saying all the right things, looks very impressive in that fight against Galvin. So how does he match up against Mitch Gagnon? Sorry, it was Carlos Galvin. How does he match up against Mitch Gagnon? Well, I actually think he matches up very, very well with Mitch Gagnon. Obviously, Smith's a low-level striker. Gagnon hits hard, he's aggressive, but I don't think Mitch Gagnon has the defensive wrestling to stop Cole Smith from tying him up and driving him into the cage and working for takedowns. I really think based on that fight, Cole Smith can have a lot of success with his grappling. And I say that because in Gagnon's past fights, his takedown defense hasn't looked bulletproof. He can definitely be taken down. And also something else I've noticed about Gagnon is that when he's defending takedowns against the cage or when he's on the ground and trying to work his way back to his feet, he does give his back up a lot, which is obviously suicide against a guy like Cole Smith with long limbs that does such a good job of chaining takedowns into back control and taking his opponent's back. And another reason why I like Cole Smith in this fight is because he has got a huge size advantage over Mitch Gagnon. He's 5'11" compared to Mitch Gagnon, who's just 5'5", and those long limbs will enable Cole Smith to have a lot of success in the grappling. One of the reasons why he's so good at controlling his opponent's body with body locks off 2 double underhooks is because he's got long arms. And with Mitch Gagnon having quite a small frame at 5'5", it's going to make it very difficult for Gagnon to prevent Smith from connecting his hands around Gagnon's body and controlling him and dragging him to the ground. Also, Smith's longer legs will enable him to get deeper hooks in place so that if he does take Gagnon's back, that body triangle is going to be very difficult to shake off, and even if Smith gets 2 deep hooks in, it's going to be difficult for Gagnon to shake him off. And there are also some issues with Gagnon. He hasn't fought in almost 2.5 years, and even more worryingly, he's only fought one time in the last 4 or 5 years. So, where has he been? I mean, the latest thing that's been keeping him out of the octagon is a blown ACL. But why hasn't he been able to compete? Why has he been, only competing one time in the last 4 or 5 years? It's a big concern. Is he healthy? Is he still motivated? Has he been able to support himself? We talk about Cole Smith being a fighter making his UFC debut on short notice, and a massive percentage of those fighters under those circumstances lose. But at the same time, a reason why a massive percentage of those fighters lose when they make their UFC debut is because they're trying to be a pro fighter while not earning the money to support themselves as a pro fighter. They can't afford to eat good, they can't afford to train good. So a lot of these guys, when they make their UFC debut, they're also working multiple jobs to try and support themselves, which puts them at a big disadvantage when they're going up against established UFC fighters who are earning enough money to train full time to eat good. But Gagnon might find himself in that similar position because he hasn't earned any money for 2.5 years, barely any money since 2014. He wouldn't have got paid much for this loss against Matthew Lopez. $10,000-$20,000 absolute maximum is nothing really. So what is his motivation for coming back? Is he coming back because he needs the money? Gagnon's definitely got some issues. So if we look at this fight from a betting perspective, the current odds on Mitch Gagnon are around about an average of 1.87, which is minus 115 for an implied probability of 53%. And there is no way that I would bet Mitch Gagnon just because of his layoff, his injuries. I am a little bit concerned how he's been able to support himself, if he's able to buy good food, train well, train full time. Also, I think the size advantage for Cole Smith could cause him a big problem. So if we take a look at the odds on Smith, where are they? So currently around about an average of 2.0, which is plus 100 for an implied probability of 50%. I mean, this is a real shame for me. If this wasn't Cole Smith's debut, I would definitely bet him at these odds. But for me, it's just irresponsible to bet him at these odds, knowing that a massive percentage of fighters lose when they make their UFC debut, especially when they make their debut on short notice. I just don't see a massive margin here. It's too much of a risk for me. It's just a shame. It's a shame that his odds are what they are, and it's a shame that he's not had 1 or 2 fights in the UFC, because I think stylistically, with his chain wrestling, he's a bad matchup for Mitch Gagnon, and I also think the size advantage and his long limbs are going to make this a difficult matchup for Gagnon. If Smith's odds improved up to somewhere around about 2.20, I would bet him. But at the current odds, for me, it's a pass. I don't think he's a terrible bet. I think he's got a great chance of winning. I really do. But it's just, I need to love a bet to be able to pull the trigger. Like Glover last week, we had a massive margin over the bookies on Glover, hit a big winner on Glover. This just isn't a bet I love, and I need to love a bet in order to place it. So no bets on that fight for me. I don't think Cole Smith's necessarily a bad bet. He's probably a good pick for your DraftKings teams. But yeah, I'm going to pass personally. So the next fight that I want to talk about in today's video is Carl Nelson against Matt Sayles. Now, this is another very tricky fight to talk about because there isn't basically any footage available on Carl Nelson from over the last couple of years. Obviously, he's had his UFC debut against Diego Ferreira. That fight ended in round 2, but I can't be too harsh on him because, again, fighters... 9 times out of 10 fighters significantly underperform in their debut, so I'm expecting him to look much better in this second fight than how he looked in his debut. And also the fights before that, his 3 fights before his debut, ended very quickly, and I don't want to go back and watch these fights from 2016 and before that, because with Carl Nelson only being 28 years old, when this fight against Jonathan Brookins took place, he only would have been 25, 26 years old, and he will have made such massive improvements since then that there's no point in judging him on these fights because fighters improve at such a rapid rate. This footage isn't going to be relevant. So there's not a great deal of footage on Nelson. Talking about this fight, I can only really evaluate him on his matchup against Diego Ferreira and these matchups that ended very quickly. And what I would say about Nelson is he does look decent. He's very aggressive, hits very hard, quite technical. But at the same time, there's a lot we don't know about him. We don't know anything about his cardio. We don't really know anything about his chin. We don't know that much about his takedown defense or ground game. So this is a fight that you can't really bet because Carl Nelson is a completely unknown entity. Matt Sayles' style of fighting is very much a style of being a tough, hard-nosed grinder, very similar style to Brian Barberena. He's not particularly good at anything. He's reasonably okay at everything, but he just looks to break his opponents with toughness and pressure, just walks them down, chipping away at them with volume and pressure and hoping that he'll break them. 9 times out of 10, this guy's going to be second best in terms of technique, but the Brian Barberena style of toughness makes him a difficult opponent for anyone. But from what I've seen, Nelson is very dangerous, so this is a very tricky fight to call. I don't really have an opinion on this fight because there isn't really that much footage available on Nelson. I mean, in terms of skills and technique, Nelson is better than Sayles, But what's his cardio like? Is he going to be able to hang with Sayles' high-pressure style of fighting for 15 minutes? It's impossible to say. So that matchup's an easy pass to me, guys. I mean, the odds are pretty much irrelevant. Without knowing what Nelson brings to the table, you can't really cap it anyway. So that one's an easy pass. So now we move on to the next fight, which is the main event between Donald Cerrone and Iaquinta. And this is one of those fights that illustrates why pre-fight research and studying tape is so important. Because when I first saw this matchup, Iaquinta's name really jumped out at me as being a good prospective bet, because I think about Cerrone as being this aging veteran. You know, he's had well over 40 pro fights now. He's definitely on a decline. And I see Iaquinta as this, you know, younger guy, 32 years old, in his prime, coming up, young, aggressive, hungry, improving. I just saw it as being a bit of a changing of the guard fight. And, you know, with Iaquinta being tough, having great cardio, having a great chin, I just thought that he would be able to, just out something Cerrone, like out tough him, outwork him, outgrind him over 5 rounds, just the solid chin, the cardio, just basically out-grit Cerrone is basically what I'm trying to say. But this is one of those weird fights where when I started to do research, I completely changed my mind on how I thought it would play out. I went from being in the camp of thinking that Iaquinta would be a good bet to feeling very strongly that Donald Cerrone was a good bet. And that just illustrates that your mind can play tricks on you. You know, I had this perception in my mind of Iaquinta being a strong wrestler and a very technical boxer. And when I watched footage of both guys, I didn't really see that. You know, Iaquinta is everything I just said. He is a tough guy. He's got great cardio. He's got a great chin. He will fight at a high pace for 5 rounds. But in terms of technique, he's not a particularly strong offensive wrestler. Doesn't have a particularly heavy top game. Doesn't have particularly strong takedowns. And his striking was the most underwhelming part for me out of everything. When I went back and watched Iaquinta's past fights, I noticed that he's very basic, very predictable, and he's also a single shot fighter. He doesn't really throw combinations. He only really throws one punch or one kick, and that is not going to be enough to trouble a guy like Donald Cerrone. Now, I know Cerrone is on a decline. I know he isn't what he used to be. But we've all seen his Matrix-style highlight reels where he'll uncork 6 or 7 strike devastating combos with pinpoint accuracy and knockout power. And I just don't see Iaquinta's very basic, very predictable style of striking causing him too much of a problem. Obviously, Cerrone is a slow starter. It's possible Iaquinta could catch him with something big early. But if Iaquinta gives Cerrone time to grow into the fight and settle into a rhythm and find his range, I think Iaquinta's screwed. I went from thinking that the longer this fight goes on, the better it is for Iaquinta, because his toughness and cardio can start to weigh in for him and give him the upper hand and advantage. But then, when I started watching footage, I actually think that if Iaquinta doesn't get it done early, he's in big trouble, because as soon as Cerrone starts to find his range against Iaquinta's very basic style, I just think he's going to pick him apart and annihilate him. I really do. So it's an interesting fight, and one of the things that puts Iaquinta at such risk of losing this matchup is that he reaches on his punches. So if you go back and watch Iaquinta's fights, when he throws punches, you'll see he kind of pours shots and reaches and leaves his chin out when he reaches with his shots. I can't really show you what I mean because the microphone's in the way, but if you watch him, you'll see kind of reaches. He doesn't really land with sharp, fast technical technique. He reaches for everything, and that puts him at significant risk of being caught with one of Cerrone's huge head kick counters. You know, with the way that Iaquinta reaches into his punches, he could walk right onto a big head kick from Cerrone, which is obviously not what you want to do at all. So I do think Cerrone's a decent bet this week, guys. In terms of grappling, I actually give Cerrone an advantage there as well. I mean, Iaquinta is a decent wrestler, very high-level ground game, excellent submission defense. But even though Cerrone's branded as being a striker, he has spent decades training at some of the best MMA gyms in the world with some of the best fighters in the world, or at least 15 years of training at some of the best MMA gyms in the world. So he's developed his own high-level ground game and wrestling. And I really think if this fight went to the ground, I would give Cerrone the advantage from a technical point of view. And another massive advantage that Cerrone has in this fight is his clinch work. I mean, throughout his career, we saw flashes of clinch work from Cerrone, but over the last few years where he started training with Joe Schilling, we've seen his clinch game come on massively. You know, the work that he can do in the clinch now with knees and elbows is very, very good. And the clinch is not really an area where Iaquinta has any set of skills at all. You'll very rarely see Iaquinta work in the clinch. And I feel the clinch could be huge for Cerrone because it's a position where he can catch a break in the fight if he's under pressure, while also delivering damage to Iaquinta's body with his vicious knees, you know, and also getting some control time. So this is one of those fights where I think Donald Cerrone has an advantage over Iaquinta everywhere, and for that reason I think he's a good bet. Now obviously every bet carries risk. I know there are going to be a load of knuckleheads in the comments telling me that Iaquinta is going to knock Cerrone out, and it could absolutely happen. Like I always say, there is no right or wrong in this business. There is only different pathways that a fight could play out, and on any given night any one of those pathways could play out. You know, Iaquinta could catch Cerrone in a flying armbar in 30 seconds. It can happen. It's MMA. But it's my job as a professional gambler to try and read all the information available and try and predict the most likely outcome, and then compare it to the payoff in the odds to see if a bet is worth it. And I can tell you right now, Donald Cerrone is never going to be a safe bet. There are issues with him. He is 36 years old. He is on a steep decline. He's declining from fight to fight, whereas Iaquinta at 32 years old, you'd expect him to still be making improvements. Also, the weight cut to 155 pounds is absolutely brutal for Donald Cerrone. He is a big guy. You know, at welterweight, he looked healthy, fast and sharp and powerful, whereas he has to kill himself to get down to the 155 pound lightweight limit. So that's a risk as well in betting Cerrone this weekend. And also, Cerrone's quite open about the fact that he struggles with nerves and anxiety, and sometimes struggles with his motivation. You know, he has admitted to sometimes in the past just not showing up for fights, which means he is inconsistent on any given night. He may just not show up and put in a terrible performance. So all these risk factors are present, but there's risk with every bet. You will never find a bet which doesn't carry any risk. But we can factor these risk factors into the probability we give a fighter of winning. And even with all these risk factors that I've just discussed, I still think that Cerrone's worth a bet. Now, his odds have been declining steadily over the last week or so. On Sunday, which is around about 4 days ago now, he was up at around about a 2.23 underdog. He's now declined down to around even money. I tipped him to my members yesterday. I think that bet was put out. Yeah, so I sent this bet out to my members 2 days ago when Cerrone was at slightly better odds than what he is now. But still, at these odds of an average of around about 2.0, still think he's a good bet. You know, if I'm capping this fight, I personally give Cerrone around about a 60% chance of winning, because I believe if both these guys showed up and fought to their full potential, I would cap Cerrone at being having a 70 to 80% chance of winning this fight. I think his skills are that substantial. If he shows up and performs his full potential, I think he destroys Iaquinta. But obviously, with the risk of the weight cut being hard, the dropping down the lightweight, the stress and anxiety and the flakiness of Cerrone, you know, and also the fact that he's getting old, there is risk there. So I can't cap him quite at 70 to 80%. I think 60% is reasonable given his skill advantages, given the fact that he is saying that he's got the weight cut sorted now that he's fighting at lightweight, now that he's taking his title run seriously. He sounds very, very motivated. He wants to get the title at 155 pounds. So Cerrone's saying all the right things, sounds very motivated, and if Cerrone is motivated and hungry, this is a tough night for Iaquinta. So I think 60% is a reasonable number to cap him at. So I think there's value there. That would give us a 10% margin over the bookies. So needless to say, don't really need to look into the odds on Iaquinta. I think Cerrone is a good bet get here, but obviously there are significant risk factors at play, so don't go too big on him, but I think there's value there, guys. So that is it for part 2 of this video. I'm going to be back very soon with part 3. In fact, I think I'm going to record it in just a few hours, so watch out for that. Again, please hit the like button below, it helps the channel grow, and I will also let you know very soon when the bonus video will be coming. And please, if you haven't already, consider subscribing, it would mean a lot to me. But take care, guys, I'll be back very soon with part 3.
Too many thoughts on my mind, I can't sleep at night, so I just keep writing. I don't need no help, I don't need opinions, so don't waste my time then. I just been living online, my city don't show me no love and that's fine. Fuck local radio stations, I got more plays than all of these rappers combined. I'm going again, I've been going in, I'm fed up with so many things. I gotta just let it all out, I'm talking about the shit they've been talking.